There are seasons in life where nothing moves. You wake up feeling the same weight you went to bed with. The days blur, the motivation is gone. The clarity you once had feels distant, like it belongs to someone you used to be. You smile on the outside, but somewhere deep inside, something aches, not loudly, just enough to remind you that you're not where you're meant to be. And in that stillness, in that sacred silence, it's easy to feel abandoned by life itself. But what if that silence is not a punishment, but an invitation? When everything feels stuck, it's often because your soul is speaking in a language the world forgot to teach you. You're not broken, you're being recalibrated. Realignment always feels like resistance at first. The higher power that shaped the stars does not rush the unfolding of anything sacred, including you. And sometimes it takes stillness to awaken what motion never could. This isn't about forcing your way through. It's about remembering who you were before the noise, listening deeper, trusting the invisible, surrendering, not in defeat, but in devotion to something greater than your current circumstances. When life doesn't move, it's often because it's waiting for you to come back into alignment with your spirit. Here's how you begin that realignment. There comes a moment when the noise of the world gets so loud, you can no longer hear yourself think, let alone feel. Your mind becomes crowded, filled with the expectations of others, the pull of digital distractions, the opinions that were never yours to begin with. And when your spirit is buried beneath constant stimulation, you begin to forget the sound of your own truth. That's when things start to feel stuck, not because you're lazy or broken, but because the voice that guides you, your inner compass, has been drowned out. The soul doesn't yell, it waits patiently until you're quiet enough to return to it. We were not designed to live in chaos. We were not made to be constantly on, endlessly consuming, endlessly reacting. Somewhere along the way, the sacredness of stillness was lost. People call it boredom, they call it procrastination, but sometimes what you think is resistance is actually your spirit begging you to slow down and come home to yourself. Quiet the external noise, not just the noise of traffic, phones, and media, but the noise of comparison. The noise of trying to prove yourself, the noise of urgency that tells you you're already behind. When you begin to strip all that away, there is a silence that rises. And in that silence, something shifts. You begin to feel again, not just surface emotion, but the deeper currents. The ones you've been too busy to notice. The ones that hold the key to what's next for you. Sometimes people fear that quiet because they're afraid of what they'll hear. But what if that quiet isn't emptiness at all? What if it's the sacred meeting ground between you and the higher power that never stopped whispering to you? This is where clarity lives. This is where peace is remembered, not in more movement, not in louder voices, but in less. In softness, in presence. When you turn the volume of the world down, you're able to remember what's always been guiding you, what never left. And in that remembrance, you no longer feel stuck. You realize it wasn't that the path was gone. It was just buried under everything that didn't belong to you. Sometimes we confuse silence with absence. We think if life isn't loud, then nothing is happening, but the soul doesn't work that way. The deeper work, the real work, often happens quietly. It unfolds in the background, in the unseen, and that's why so many miss it. Because they're chasing noise instead of listening for truth. It's not easy to quiet the external noise. It takes courage to turn your phone off. It takes strength to step away from the constant need for validation. It takes maturity to say, I need to hear myself again. And when you do that, when you create space for your own voice, you're not disconnecting from life. You're reconnecting with your essence, with the part of you that knows who you are, even when the world forgets. You were born with that voice. You didn't have to earn it. It's the thread that ties you to the Creator, the direct line to divine wisdom. And no matter how much noise you've absorbed, that thread has never been severed. It may be faint right now, but it's still there, still waiting, still whispering, "Come back." This isn't about isolation, it's about restoration. It's about returning to a place inside yourself where your spirit can breathe again, where decisions aren't made from fear or pressure, but from alignment and knowing. When the noise falls away, the path becomes clearer, not because new information appears, but because you appear. The real you, the grounded you, the version of yourself that was hidden beneath everything you thought you had to be. There is great wisdom in silence, not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of presence. And when you honor that space, when you create room for your soul to speak, you'll find that clarity was never gone. It was just waiting for you to slow down long enough to listen. Discomfort has a way of showing up uninvited. It doesn't knock gently. It presses on your chest in the middle of the night. It turns moments of stillness into questions that echo louder than you expected. Most people try to run from it through distraction, busyness, numbing, pretending, and who could blame them? It's not easy to sit in what hurts. It's not easy to hold space for what you don't yet understand. But what if that very discomfort is the doorway to the alignment your soul has been craving? There's a kind of pain that doesn't just ache. It instructs, it reveals, not to punish, but to awaken. The wound, uncomfortable as it may be, often holds more wisdom than the success we chase or the validation we crave. But we're taught to escape pain, to silence it, to label it as weakness. What we're not often taught is how to sit with it long enough to see what it's trying to tell us. When you stop running from your discomfort and instead begin to lean in, to feel it, to breathe into it, to ask it what it wants you to know, you discover that pain is often not the enemy. It's the spotlight. It illuminates what has been out of balance. It reveals where you've been abandoning yourself to keep the peace. It uncovers the places you've been striving instead of surrendering. And when you sit with it, without judgment, something begins to loosen. You realize the pain isn't trying to break you. It's trying to bring you back to yourself. There's a sacred intelligence in emotional pain. It knows when to rise. It knows when to press. The grief that surprises you out of nowhere. The frustration you can't quite name. The heaviness in your chest when you're in rooms where you don't feel seen. These aren't random. They're signals from your soul, gentle, powerful invitations to pay attention, to ask deeper questions, to look at the life you're living and whisper, "Is this really mine?" Avoiding discomfort may bring temporary relief, but real freedom doesn't come from escaping. It comes from understanding. It comes from staying present through the ache until clarity surfaces. It comes from honoring the emotion, not just managing it. And the only way to do that is to stop numbing long enough to feel. Not all storms show up to destroy. Some come to cleanse. And sometimes that inner storm, that emotional wave that feels too much, too raw, too heavy, is the very thing that begins your healing. When the tears fall and you have no words to explain them, you're closer to truth than you think. That's your soul speaking. That's divine honesty rising to the surface. And though it may feel like unraveling, it's really remembering. You don't have to have the answers when the discomfort shows up. You don't have to fix it right away. What matters is that you show up with presence, with humility, with willingness. You say to that feeling, I see you, I won't run from you this time. And in that moment, the energy shifts. You begin to feel held not just by your own courage, but by something greater. A presence that doesn't demand perfection, only honesty, only openness. You were never meant to carry pain alone, nor were you meant to fear it, because pain, when honored, becomes wisdom. It becomes a guide, a mirror, a teacher, and it teaches in a way that comfort never could. It reveals what still matters to you, what still needs healing, what still lives inside you that you've been too afraid to name. Sometimes what feels like falling apart is really the soul making room for a new kind of alignment, one that doesn't come through answers, but through surrender, one that doesn't require you to be strong, just real, and when you allow yourself to feel, fully and without shame, you find that even in the discomfort, something holy is happening. There is a kind of presence that cannot be faked, a stillness that doesn't come from effort, but from surrender. You don't reach it by forcing silence or thinking harder. It's not found in perfect words or spiritual performances. It lives in the space between, in breath, in awareness, in the quiet knowing that even in your most uncertain moments, you are not alone. When life begins to feel stuck, it's easy to feel abandoned, not just by people, but by something deeper. It's not that we stop believing in a higher presence, it's that we forget how to feel it. We try to reconnect through noise, through desperate prayers, through trying to be good enough or spiritual enough or still enough. But the presence of the one who sees all is not something you earn. It is not a reward for perfection. It simply is, and it meets you not when you try harder, but when you soften. To reconnect with the Creator in stillness is not to seek something new. It's to remember what's always been. This isn't about reciting the right phrases or lighting a candle or sitting in some perfect position. It's about letting your whole being come into alignment with truth, truth that cannot be explained but is deeply known. The truth that something greater than you has always been holding the pieces, even when you didn't notice. Stillness is not the absence of thought. It's the quiet awareness that allows you to observe without clinging. It's the moment you stop striving and start noticing. It's the space where time stretches, where the ache in your chest is no longer something to escape, but something to bring into the light. In that stillness, the divine doesn't shout. It doesn't command. It whispers, gently, steadily, in a voice you once trusted, before the world made you doubt your own intuition. To be still is to say, I don't have the answers, but I'm here. It is to sit in the space between what was and what will be, and choose to believe that you are not forgotten. Stillness reminds you that divine presence is not tied to circumstances. It is not distant when life is painful and close when life is easy. It is always, and when you slow down enough to feel into that truth, a strange kind of peace begins to rise, not loud but deep, not surface level but unshakable. Sometimes reconnecting with the Creator means unlearning everything you were taught about how that connection is supposed to look. It means letting go of performance. It means releasing the guilt of not doing enough. It means allowing yourself to be held by something you can't control, something beyond words. It means trusting that presence can exist in silence, in questions, even in your weariness. You don't need to dress up your emotions before you enter that stillness. You don't need to hide your confusion or pretend your faith is stronger than it is. What's real is what connects. The vulnerability, the rawness, the breath you take when you're not sure how to keep going. That's where the sacred lives. In the honesty, in the surrender, the presence of the higher power is not always a loud experience. Sometimes it's just the feeling of not being alone in your most private grief. Sometimes it's the peace that makes no sense. Sometimes it's the quiet strength that keeps you from giving up, even when you have every reason to. Stillness doesn't always change your situation, but it changes you in the middle of it. And when you change, everything around you begins to shift in response. Let your stillness become the space where the divine meets you, not because you did everything right, but because you chose to return. You chose to be open again. You chose to remember what your spirit never forgot. You are not lost. You are not forgotten. The one who sees all has never stopped seeing you. There is a quiet kind of suffering that comes from trying to control everything. It doesn't always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it hides behind constant planning, behind the need to predict every outcome, behind the pressure you put on yourself to get it right, to be right, to stay one step ahead of whatever might fall apart. But there comes a point when your spirit gets tired of holding it all. Not because you're weak, but because deep down you were never meant to carry what belongs to the hands of the divine. Letting go of control is not failure, it's not resignation, it's not giving up on the life you want. It's allowing room for the higher power to do what only it can do. It's acknowledging that your strength has limits, but love, the pure, guiding, unseen love that holds the universe together, has not. It's choosing trust when trust feels like a risk. It's loosening your grip on how you think things should be and making space for what might be far greater than you imagined. Control is born from fear. Somewhere along the way you were taught that if you didn't manage everything, if you didn't take responsibility for everyone, for everything, things would fall apart. But what if falling apart wasn't the worst thing that could happen? What if the unraveling is where the divine does its most holy work? There is a sacred shift that happens when you stop striving and start yielding. You begin to see that your worth was never in your ability to control outcomes. It was never in how much you could accomplish or how neatly you could fix the chaos. Your worth has always been rooted in your being, in your presence, your breath, your heart. That is what connects you to the Creator, not your perfection, not your performance, but your presence. You were never expected to know everything. You were never asked to hold all the pieces and somehow make them fit. That pressure didn't come from divine wisdom. It came from fear, from ego, from the part of you that forgot how deeply held you really are. When you release the need to control, something inside you softens, the anxiety quiets, the urgency melts, and in its place, a deeper knowing rises. It is safe to let go, even when the future feels uncertain, even when the timing feels wrong, even when every part of you wants to grip tighter, because letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you trust the unfolding. You trust that the one who sees all is not bound by your timeline, that the divine design is not limited to your understanding. And when you allow space for mystery, you allow space for miracles. You don't have to pretend to feel ready. Surrender doesn't always come with ease. Sometimes it comes with trembling hands, with tears, with that silent moment when you whisper, "I've done all I can, now I hand it over." That's not weakness. That's spiritual maturity. That's what alignment feels like. Not knowing everything, but knowing when to step back and let something greater move through you. The universe is not conspiring against you. It's rearranging itself to support the truth of who you are becoming. But you can't walk into that truth if you're still holding onto every detail, every timeline, every outcome. You have to leave some space for grace, for synchronicity, for divine timing that doesn't bend to your will, but always honors your becoming. There is beauty in the hands-open posture of surrender. There is power in choosing rest when your mind says fight. There is wisdom in saying, I release what was never mine to control. And there is peace not always immediate, but always real when you remember that what is meant for you does not require force. Only faith. Clarity rarely comes in the rush. It doesn't chase you down while you're sprinting from one obligation to the next, convincing yourself that movement must equal progress. Clarity has a different rhythm. It waits for you in the quiet. It meets you when you slow down enough to hear your own soul whisper beneath the noise. There's a reason the most important truths come not when you force them, but when you return to presence. You weren't created to live disconnected from your own spirit, but it's easy to become fragmented. Life asks a lot of you. People ask a lot of you. Expectations gather like shadows, and before you realize it, your attention is pulled in every direction but inward. You forget how to listen, not because you don't care, but because everything outside of you is louder than the still voice within. Returning to your inner compass doesn't require a dramatic shift. It asks for honesty, stillness, space. It asks you to be willing to sit with what you'd rather avoid, not for punishment, but for realignment. Because your spirit remembers what your mind forgets, and that inner knowing, the one that feels less like logic and more like resonance, that's where your guidance lies. When everything feels stuck, most people look outward for the answer. They search for someone to tell them what to do. They chase the next fix, the next method, the next voice. But the most powerful alignment happens not when you chase more, but when you strip away the noise and return to the essence of who you are. Who you've always been, beneath the fear, beneath the pressure, beneath the need to be understood by others. You don't need a spotlight to validate your path. You don't need loud certainty to know you're being led. What you need is presence, to breathe, to reconnect with the part of you that still believes you're not alone in this journey. That part of you has never lost its connection to the Creator. That part of you is always tuned into the frequency of truth. But you have to stop long enough to hear it. There is a sacred rhythm to your own becoming, and when you quiet the distractions, you begin to sense it again. That inner nudge, that pull, that gentle resistance when something isn't meant for you, that deep resonance when something aligns with your soul's path, even if it makes no sense on paper. This is divine wisdom at work, not loud, not frantic, but sure, steady, kind. You were never meant to abandon yourself in order to be chosen. You were never meant to betray your inner truth just to keep the peace. Real peace doesn't come from external agreement. It comes from integrity, from living in alignment with what you know deep in your being is right for you. That's not selfishness, that's stewardship, and it takes courage, because not everyone will understand your stillness. Not everyone will see value in your quiet strength, but the one who sees all knows what it took for you to return. And when you do return, when you start listening again, you begin to make decisions that carry peace. You start saying no without guilt. You stop explaining your sensitivity. You let go of timelines that were never yours. You begin walking not in fear of missing out, but in reverence for the path uniquely shaped for your soul. Clarity is not the absence of questions. It's the presence of inner stillness that allows you to move anyway, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. It's the moment you choose presence over panic. It's the breath you take when you finally remember that you were never meant to do this disconnected from yourself. Some of the most significant shifts in your life will not come from bold declarations or perfect plans. They will come quietly, almost invisibly, when you choose to keep going without evidence that anything is changing, when everything in you wants to pause your growth until conditions improve, when the road ahead looks clouded with doubt, and you move anyway not because you feel strong, but because something in you still hopes, still believes, still listens to that subtle nudge that says, keep showing up. There's a sacred strength in staying present while the breakthrough is still unseen. Not present as in smiling through the ache or pretending to be at peace, but present in the way a tree stands through winter, rooted even in stillness, alive even when nothing is blooming. That kind of presence holds power because it means you haven't abandoned your process just because the fruit hasn't arrived yet. It means you trust the design enough to keep nurturing what no one else can see growing. Faith isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet persistence, breathing through disappointment, letting the day be what it is and showing up anyway. Choosing honesty instead of hiding. Choosing hope without fanfare. Choosing to believe that your steps still matter, even when there's no applause or confirmation or validation. You're not waiting for your alignment to begin, you're living in it, even when it feels unfinished. That's the mystery of the path. You grow while unsure, you evolve in the dark, you align not because everything is clear, but because you've chosen to be in tune with something deeper than fear, something more eternal than circumstance. The ones who learn how to walk with the Creator in seasons of stuckness become unshakable not because they are never shaken, but because they know where to return when they are. They don't need the stars to line up before they trust the sky. They've learned how to recognize presence in the midst of silence. And in that recognition, they find the strength to take one more step. Breakthrough often disguises itself as ordinary days, as quiet obedience, as consistency without proof, but every act of courage, every refusal to numb out, every moment of integrity, it all carries weight in the unseen. You may not see it, but it's not wasted. The higher power does not miss a moment. The one who sees all sees you, not just your victories, but your faithfulness in the in-between. Keep doing what aligns with truth, even when no one's watching. Keep speaking gently, even when the world shouts. Keep honoring your body, your breath, your boundaries. Keep pausing to listen to the deeper voice, the one that isn't afraid of slow growth or hidden seasons. Keep trusting that there's meaning even in what you don't understand yet. The shift you long for may not come with a rush of emotion. It may not be marked by fireworks or certainty. It might come in a moment so subtle you miss it, until you look back and realize you're not who you used to be. That's how transformation works. Quiet, steady, spiritual. It reaches the bones. It doesn't ask permission. It flows where it's welcomed. It fills the spaces you thought were too dry, too broken, too far gone. You are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to walk slow. You are allowed to keep becoming, even if your process confuses others. The Creator is not rushing you. Divine timing never demands urgency. It invites trust. And every time you return to that trust, even for a moment, you are aligning more than you know. This isn't the end. It's the pause before the turning, and the one who sees all is still with you.